Paw, Catspaw, holy fuck. Okay, so here we go. Not a Catspaw fan. Maybe a slightly original idea for a Star Trek episode, but the execution is silly. The premise is a bit laughable. I can't imagine this script reading as very exciting in the first place. I'm at a loss as to what to say here. The episode is a bore. Could it be one of the worst episodes of the series? What are those? The Man Trap and Charlie X are tepid, as are the Naked Time and Mud's women. Miri is not impressive. Catspaw is very much not great, but is likely superior to the subsequent broadcast order, I Mud. Yikes. Obsession I do not personally care for. Spock's brain is a genuine travesty. Wink of an eye, empath for Land of Troyes, turnabout intruder. Let me know your own picks for worst Star Trek TOS episodes if you feel so inclined. I have to fill out maybe another 2 minutes of Catspaw if I feel like it. But does Catspaw deserve it? That's an interesting question. No, but what can I say to make this slightly more interesting than it is? Not sure. Hey, on the way, I guess get ready for an audiobook reading of Dune Messiah. It felt like reading that again. I had sort of kind of read it / skimmed through it, I think once when I was younger. In anticipation of Villeneuve's subsequent Dune film, which will adapt Messiah. I'm reading this text again, and it's actually pretty strong thus far. It feels like I think Herbert once referred to himself as like the first fan of Dune, so which I love because it means that he was as into and excited about his world as the fans subsequently were. And like, of course he was. He wrote it. Like you couldn't have been motivated to write such a dense, brilliant, and thorough texts in the subsequent world derived from that text if you weren't kind of a fan of what you were writing anyway. And so the sequel sort of reads like him envisioning, oh, what could happen in the sequel to my story, and he brings all these elements together. And its identity is more as a sequel, like at least in its conception, than Dune, which is sort of about everything ever. And Dune's an intentional opus, and then he's like, I'm going to do a sequel to that story, but I don't know if Dune Messiah is an opus in of itself. I mean, it's a much shorter book. It's only about half of the length of the original Dune, so maybe that's consciously the case. Maybe he intended it as sort of just like a bookend, but more so. Although Children of Dune presumably was also in the works pretty early. I wasn't aware to the extent to which I know Children of Dune and Dune Messiah, parts of which were being written or finished before Dune itself was he'd finished. Herbert had, but still, like he'd have the crux of Dune figured out before he'd really finished it, and then he's sort of daydreaming. Oh, what happens next? And oh, this and face dances, and we'll see the Spacing Guild, and Ali as a player, and this and that, and it's interesting stuff. But it does read like he's sort of envisioning, fantasizing about a sequel to his world that was a very self-contained, brilliant text that for maybe 3/4 of its existence he had no idea, no intention of doing a sequel to. Then he's like, oh, what if there was a sequel? Where could I go with it? And that's a really cool thing to me because I just kind of like that about sequels in a way. I'm kind of fond of the idea of sequels. I guess I'm probably, it's probably not a common belief really, but most people are sort of kind of snooty around them, the existence of sequels, period. But I kind of like the idea of like, oh, where does the story go next? It starts out, there's no happy endings. I like that. But I'll just close it here. Thanks everyone. We went over the intended time because why the hell not? Who cares?